join me live in session down at the famous Walthamstow Reservoir in London for another live CineCarp episode. And this trip is a trip down memory lane. Now, I am known for fishing a large complex of lakes in Oxford called linear fisheries, but believe it or not, before the days of social media and video, this was where I cut my teeth as an angler, here at the famous Walthamstow Reservoirs right in the heart of London. At the time, I was only about 10 or 11 and I used to jump in with my old man every single weekend for 3 years, and we used to fish every Saturday and Sunday, and this was where I learned so much about carp fishing, and it sort of paved the way for how I carp fish today. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail of that later on in the video, but as you can see, it has started off very, very well. But this fish is coming nice and close. It looks like a nice scaly mirror. I'm going to get this one in. I'm going to run you through what I've done to get this bite and a little bit more about my history fishing here on the Walthamstow complex. Well, I've actually got another bite on my left-hand rod, just like the good old days. It's good to be back. That is a lovely fish, that one. Here we go. That is a real nice fish, but before we look at him, I'm going to hit the other rod. Well, I've actually got a triple take. Oh, Walthamstow, nice to be back. Crazy, absolutely crazy. The last rod on the bait. Go in there. I've got to tend to your other mate that's on the other one. Oh, sneezed. One thing I see a lot of people doing when they get a double take, or indeed a triple take, is they panic and they try and pick up all the rods and reel all the fish in at the same time. Over the years, I've come to learn that deal with the fish that you've got on, unless you're fishing locked up and you're fishing to snags, and obviously it's a different situation, but here I'm only fishing up to an island with no snags, so they can't really go anywhere, is always deal with the first fish. Because I'd rather land one and then have a disaster potentially with the second than mess around trying to land two simultaneously and have a disaster with both of them. So if you do ever get a double take, don't panic, which I know is easier said than done, but just take them one at a time, land one, then get to the next one. And 9 times out of 10, you get them all in. Come on then, in we go. 3 out of 3, job's a good one. Welcome back to Walthamstow. Triple take in the bag. Lovely times. Right, I'm just getting the rod to clip back up and straight back out there onto the spot. Fishing at Walthamstow all them years ago, this was actually the place that taught me the importance of getting the rod straight back out after catching. With it being days only, you've got to make the most of every minute that you're here, and on so many occasions, clipping the rods up, getting them back out onto the spot caught us so many more fish. So this one's clipped back up, I'm going to wang it back out there, get the other one out, and we'll deal with the fish. Well, how's that for proof in the pudding? I literally just slung that rod back out, clipped the bobbin on, turned around to get the second one, and it was away. And I'm into yet another Walthamstow #1 carp. Unbelievable. Feels so good to be back. In we go, another one. Oh, madness. Absolute madness. Well, it's been an absolutely mega start, far better than I expected it to have gone. I've got 4 fish in the net down here, and before I deal with any more stuff to do with the rods, I'm just going to slip the smaller ones back. There's no need to get them out. They're all absolutely stunning, but there's 2 probably around the 12 to 14 pound mark, and there's a couple of bigger ones. I'm going to put the smaller ones back. Let's get the bigger ones out and we'll have a look, because they are lovely, lovely fish. Well, how about that one then for a welcome back to Walthamstow? The Stow has always had so many incredible fish in, and even though that this is one of the stockies that's probably been introduced over the last few years, the future of Walthamstow is so bright. But what a fish! A real heavily fully scaled mirror. Look at the scales underneath its lateral line, so close together. What, I don't really know what to say. What a phenomenal fish. And yeah, it's quite clear that fishing how we used to fish all them years ago still does bites, albeit this time I'm a little bit more accurate. But look at that, a fine example of a Walthamstow #1 mirror carp. Lovely. Well, look at that one then, another absolutely stunning #1 carp. What a great return it's been back to Walthamstow. 3.5 hour drive here this morning. Never ever did I expect it to have started like this, but I am going to put this one back, give it about another 45 minutes to an hour on the one before I'm going to pack my gear up and I'm going to head over to the 2 and 3. The reason why I've chosen to come to Walthamstow is because this was the first place where I really got to grips with big carp fishing, if you like. Now, Walthamstow is famous. It has been famous for years and years and years. But back 20 years ago, when I first started fishing and going with my old man every weekend, there was just something about it, like the smell. I know that sounds mad, but every place has its own unique smell. Where it is, the location of it, how the lakes are made up, but the main reason is the fish. You know, Walthamstow fish are so recognisable. Back in the day, before social media, you used to race to the shops, you used to buy your magazines. Before you had even looked at the description, you could tell by the shape of the fish, the background, you knew exactly where it was from. Walthamstow is just so unique. And the fish that we were fishing for 20 years ago, some of them are still swimming around, and one venue in particular, the 2 and the 3, Dad caught a lot of fish out of here. I had a few, but this was also the place where I caught my very first 30 pounder. So again, it holds such a special place in my heart for my fishing. The first place I ever really saw big carp, but one of the fish that we never caught was the big common. Now back then, the big common was 43, 44 pound. And I'm standing here now some 20 years on, and it is still 43, 44 pound, and it's still swimming around out there. And it's just incredible. Like, what these fish have to go through. You know, the lakes have undergone some massive desilting projects, certainly on the 2 and the 3. There's constant water changes, there's algae blooms, loads of angling pressure, and these fish are still in here and are absolutely immaculate. It's so hard to put into a short piece how special Walthamstow is, but I'm sure for those of you watching that have fished Walthamstow, you will know why it is such a special place. And like I've already said, I could quite happily come back and fish here every day for the rest of my life, and every day would be a buzz, because no matter what I ever caught out of it or whatever I'll catch in the future, whether it's £6 or I'm lucky enough to catch one of the real big uns, my heart rate will be exactly the same, and the buzz of when one of them fish goes in the net will be exactly the same. Okay, so I'm just going to run you through the spomming setup that I use. Now I'm going to start with the rod. Me personally, I like a 12-foot rod. I've got a 12-foot designated spom rod. Now a lot of people I see, they go out, they buy the longest rod, i.e. a 13-foot rod, the stiffest rod that they can possibly find, because they think that that is going to be the answer to them getting their spoms to the moon. That simply could not be any further from the truth. Spomming is all about finding yourself a balanced setup. I use a 12-footer simply because I cannot use and will not use a 13-footer because I just don't get on with it. Secondly, onto the reel. you want a big pit reel, preferably with a slower oscillation. Slower oscillation, greater line lay, the line comes off the spool with ease, therefore increasing distance and making it a lot easier to hit the clip every single time. Onto that comes the line. Now, I always spom with braid, and the reason why I always spom with braid is because it is so much more responsive, and when I've clipped up and I found my spot, I know that provided I hit the clip every single time, I'm going to be landing my bait bang on top of the spot that I'm fishing. Now, I've got a 20-pound braided reel line and I've got a 50-pound braided shock leader. It is very important that you have a shock leader on, because if you haven't got a shock leader on, you're going to do several casts with the 20-pound braid, you're going to have a crack off, and it's going to be expensive if you're losing a spom every 6 or 8 chucks, which then leads me on to the spom itself. Again, you'll notice it isn't the biggest spom available. This is the midi X size purely and simply because when this is loaded with bait, it's around 4.5, maybe 4 3/4 ounces, and that is the perfect casting weight for me. If I use a big spom, yes, I can get it out there, but to remain consistent with it, I find it very hard. So again, because of how much spomming that I do, finding the balance setup for you will always help, rather than going out and buying the biggest and the best thinking that that is going to be the answer. And one final thing you'll notice as well is I've got a casting glove on. Whenever you are spodding, or whenever you're casting distance for that matter, always wear a finger stool or a finger protective device of some description, because let me tell you now, and I've seen this firsthand, if that braid slips or something happens, the end of your finger will be coming off. Now, like I've already said, I am no expert when it comes to casting distance. I am all self-taught. I've never had a lesson, but there are a few little things that I do that I think personally would help a lot of people. They certainly helped me, and I've stuck to it, and I've never changed, and I've never been in a situation where I've been unable to reach or cast to where the fish are, and it's always served me well in the past. The first things first is whenever you're standing, always make sure your feet are nice and balanced. I have my legs a little spread apart, and I always have my lead foot aiming exactly where I'm casting. The last thing you want to be doing is having your feet all skew-if and all over the place, because it puts your body all out of line, and before you know it, the tip of your rod is going to be going in all sorts of directions, and you're not going to be baiting up exactly where you want to. Another thing that I do is always make sure that when the rod is over my head, my arms are at full extension. If your arms are all hunched in and they're all against your body, you're not going to be able to get the tip of the rod moving, and you're not going to be able to compress the rod, which isn't going to enable the spom to go out to where you want it. And finally, and one of the biggest things that I speak to people about and that I tell people about that seems to make the biggest difference, is the hand that you use to hold the butt of the rod with. Every single time you make a cast, almost treat it like you're trying to punch yourself in your stomach. Now, I know that might seem mad, but the harder and the faster that you pull the rod from the butt end, the faster the tip will go. The faster the tip moves, the further the spom is going to go, because you're going to be putting the rod under full compression. A half compressed rod simply isn't going to do the trick. So when it comes to loading the spom itself, I know you might all be thinking, well, it's a simple case of putting the bait inside the spom and casting it out. Yes, that is indeed the case. But one thing as well that I've learned over the years is when you've loaded the bait into the spom is to give it a little shake. And aside from that as well, if you can, try to remain consistent with how much bait you put in the spom. When it comes to repetitive casting, if 1 minute your spom weighs 3 ounces, then it weighs 5 ounces, then it weighs 4 ounces, it's going to throw you all off balance and it's going to put you all out of sorts. Try where you can to keep everything as consistent as possible. I have a routine that I follow every single time. I put the same amount of bait in the spom, I close it, I give it a little shake to make sure all the bait's at the bottom. I have the same length drop, which is normally down to the spigot of the rod. And by keeping everything the same every single time, you almost get a little bit programmed and into a routine, and it just makes casting that much easier. So there you go. That's the setup that I use, and they're just a few of the simple things that I do to enable me to cast distance. By no means am I a casting expert, but over the years, I've self-taught myself to be able to fish accurately at a comfortable range to where the fish are. This morning has gone way better than I ever expected it to, but this trip wasn't about coming down to Walthamstow just to fish on the #1 and get a load of bites. This was about coming back down to somewhere that I first started fishing some 20 years ago. So I'm going to get this one in, I'm going to deal with it, I'm going to get all the kit back on the barra, and I'm going to head a short journey to the end of the 1, and I'm going to go and fish the 2 and the 3 where the proper big ones are. Well, I just caught a glimpse of it. This is a proper nice fish. Biggest one as well of the day so far. It's another scaly one. The fish that have gone back in here are absolutely stunning. And aside from catching these, there are also originals left in the one as well. So I've got one rod left out. You never know. That could go and it could be an original. But this is a proper nice fish. They kick off under the tip, something mad. Used to be a fully scoured in the 2 and 3 called Goldeneye. It's like a mini Goldeneye. Look at that for a carp. In you go. Oh, what a fish that is. What a good end to our little piece on the one. Well, how about that then to round up what has been an amazing return to the #1 at Walthamstow. I've had multiple bites already and each and every one of them absolutely stunning. But there is more to Walthamstow than just the #1. So I'm going to slip this one back. I'm going to chuck the gear onto the barra and I'm going to go for a mooch. I'm probably going to go and have a little look over at the 2 and the 3. Lovely. So I've packed up off the 1 and I'm on the 2 and the 3. I'm right up the very top end of the 3. Now, from when I fished here years ago, there's nowhere near as many pegs as what there used to be. The pegs on the far side control a lot more water than the ones on this side, but walking up the middle between the lakes, the pegs all on the far side are all taken. But I'm just stood now at the top of the 3, and up to my right is very shallow. The 3 predominantly is the shallowest lake on the whole complex. And there is a few fish milling around, but it's just started to rain, typical. But I'm going to see, or try and suss a bit of a patrol route, because I've got an island and obviously the margin. I'm going to see if they're moving in a particular area. Even just flick one rod out. I'm not going to start making loads of disturbance. Flick one rod to them maybe, but just see how it goes. I'm not going to get any gear off the barra just yet. I'm just going to have a little look, because if one fish shows somewhere else, obviously I'll act on that and I'll have a little move. But for now, I'm at the top of the 3. And I have seen a little bit of fish activity. The swim I was in, there wasn't really much more showing in front of it, but down to the left there was quite a few showing. So I've just chucked the gear on the barra and I've moved a couple of pegs down. In the grand scheme of things, it's not very far, but I've seen probably 8 or 10 fish showing in the last sort of 45 minutes. It is drawing towards the evening now. The light levels are not fading, but they are changing. Maybe that's what it needs to bring the fish on. So I'm going to move down here, ping the 3 rods out, and you never know. We've got the evening to see what we can muster up. In true Stowe fashion, I've just chucked 3 singles out onto the showing fish. Now, when I was at Thorney Weir, I had quite a lot of success fishing on a Ronnie, which isn't a rig that I've used a great deal, but it lends itself perfectly, certainly for chucking into the 3. From memory, the 3 is very silty, and it is only shallow water as well. So I've got long booms on the Ronnies, and what I've done is I've made the pop-ups over buoyant for the rig. So I've put a little piece of foam underneath the pop-up as well, and all I've done is I've just taken it to the water's edge with a pair of scissors, and I've just shaved the pop-up down so it sinks very slowly. And the theory behind that is that when the lead hits the bottom and it goes into the soft silt, the pop-up will still be a little bit buoyant, but under the weight of the hook link, when it takes on a tiny little bit of water, it will slowly sink down and nestle over the bottom nicely, meaning that the hook bait is perfectly presented. So when Mr. Carp swims over the top, it's in his eyesight and hopefully it has it. I've got a couple of hours of the day left now. This is prime time. Any day only venue. First thing in the morning, last thing in the evening is always the best time. The rods are out there, the fish are still showing, so they haven't spooked off, which is good news. And like I say, this has always been a very, very good time. So I am hopeful that there is an opportunity, but if there isn't, at least it puts me in good stead for when I arrive back here tomorrow. Well, I'm into a fish, but it's taken me round the island. It went on a mad run and I just couldn't stop it. So I'm just keeping the steady pressure on it and I'm hoping it comes free. I don't really want to look at the rod tip. I'm just sort of gone. Went round the island. Cut the hook link. I'll be gutted if we don't rectify this problem today of that fish. I'm not going to keep going on about it, but I will be gutted. I suppose the only saving grace is to have made it to where it did that quick. It probably wasn't huge. But it's a fish out of 2 and 3. And some of the fish that are still in here were swimming around when I fished it 20 years ago, 18 years ago. So it could have been one of them. But guess what? We'll never know. It's your fault, 'cause I was fanning around making you a cup of coffee because you whinged all day. You stood in my way, I couldn't see what I was doing. We'll get another one. Brilliant. I'm not whispering because I'm stalking. I am just concentrating. Oh, the feeling of hooking a fish out the stow is just unreal. And having already had the disaster that I've had, I'm hoping this isn't a repeat performance. So I'm going to concentrate on getting this in. It's a little bit scatty really, but it is shallow water, so they do fight a lot differently in here than what they do the other lakes. I'm going to focus on this because it's kited right round to the left, and I would really like to end the day on a big, big high. Still showing in close. Definitely enough evidence here for me to come back in this peg tomorrow. And we will be in this peg tomorrow because I'll be on the gate first, which is the beauty of day ticket lakes that are days only. It's a carp, all right? It might only be a small consolation prize for the one that unfortunately didn't want to come in. I'd like just to restore confidence and get this one in the net. Yes! Now he is only a small stocky, he ain't going to break any records, but let me tell you, that has made me a very, very happy angler. And the beauty of landing that is I can put to the back of the mind the one that I lost, because let's be honest, whenever you lose one, no matter how much you try not to think about it, you can never put it to the back of your mind without thinking about it a million times over. But that's the cure. We've got ourselves a 2 and 3 carp. Come on. We've only got about 40 minutes of light left before we've got to pack up anyway. I'm not going to get the mat all soaking wet. He's probably about, I don't know, he's probably just touching double figures, but you know what, I really don't care. It's a fish out of 2 and 3. Oh, what an amazing day it's been. What a great return to Walthamstow it's been. I'm going to slip it back, dry the net out a little bit. I've got 2 rods left out right where the fish are showing, so you never know. This is the time on here, so there is always chance for one more before we go home and come back tomorrow. Yes! Well makes up for the one that I lost, irrespective of size. And that's something I always stick to and stick by. I fish for carp no matter what size. Off you go, my mate. Thank you very much. You'll make the McDonald's taste a bit sweeter on the way home. They don't have to be big to make you happy. That's what she said. Well, I said there's always a chance, and I'm into another fish. My heart is racing. I'll tell you, if you could have a heartbeat monitor on the screen, I think I'll be coming up close to needing a bit of medical assistance. Oh, right. Concentrate, fat boy. Concentrate. They all count in here. They all count in here. Proper shaking his head. You just never know in here. Never know. Shallow water fish always fight very weird anyway. But I'll tell you what, 3 bites out of here this afternoon. We've had a hell of a day. Absolute hell of a day. Way better than I could have expected it to have ever gone. I'm definitely be putting bait in here tonight. I'm not saying I might have had more bites if I'd have put bait out, but if I was fishing anywhere else, I would have jumped straight on the spod. Certainly if I was fishing a place like Linear, majority of the commons, like the original ones, like the proper old things. Oh yeah, he's a lovely fish. Come on, be older than me, this common. In we go. That'll do to end the day. Yes! Oh, that is how we end the day. Yes! A proper old school stow 2 and 3 common. Come on. Lebash! Well, how's about that then, for one to make up for that loss earlier? I know I had that small mirror, but this is what you fish the stow for. A proper old original common, mid-20. This fish here is probably older than me, and this fish was probably swimming around when I used to fish here all those years ago with my dad. What a way to end what has been an incredible day. And to think, still got a couple of days left, who knows what else could happen, but look at that. A proper stow common carp. They don't make them like this anymore. Well, it's day 2 and it's just gone 6 o'clock and I'm here waiting on the gate ready to get in. Now, because Walthamstow is days only, we wasn't allowed to stay on the site overnight, so we went back to Brad, the cameraman's house, which is about 45 minutes away. And the days in the summer are 7 AM until 10 PM, so they are long days, and by the time we got back, we didn't get our heads down until probably gone sort of 11:30. And because I put the bait in yesterday and I want to get back in the same peg, I wanted to make sure that I was first on the gate. So even though it seems ridiculous to most people, but I left at 3:30 this morning and I got on the gate at about 4:15, which I know is mad, but these days only places, the more effort you put in, the greater the rewards. And like I keep saying, this is where I learn to put maximum effort into my fishing, because this place bred it into me that the more effort you put in, the greater the rewards will be. So yeah, here I am, got about 45 minutes until the gate opens. I've tried a couple of fresh rigs, everything's sorted. All we need to do now is wait for them gates to open. I'm going to bolt round to the swim because it takes Brad a little bit of time to get all the camera equipment ready and on the wheelbarrow. I'm going to get round into the peg, get the rods out, and you'll join me there then. So after a bit of a walk, I'm back in the peg where I was yesterday evening. I've got 2 rods back out onto the bait that I put out yesterday. Now I haven't put any more bait out, and the reason for that is as soon as I come into the peg, one showed, and the morning time is always a good bite time. So I've put 2 rods out there with the intention of probably redoing them between sort of 10 and 11 o'clock, which is normally a bit of a dull period on most lakes. And I am going to put a little bit more bait out because the fish are still in the area, and I'm hoping that it's not going to spook them away. And if they ate the bait that was there last night, the chances are they're probably going to come back for any more bait that I put out. And then with the third one, I've just got a really long boom and a slow sinking Ronnie with an orange pop up, exactly the same colour as what I caught on yesterday, just as a single. And I waited to see where a couple of fish showed, and sure enough, they showed pretty much in exactly the same place as where they did yesterday evening, and I pinged a single out to that. So for now, I've got 3 rods out. We're fishing. The weather is going to be a little bit rough this afternoon. We've got rain coming in from about lunchtime. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the bivvy up, and I'm going to sit at the top of the bank. I would set it up down the bottom of the bank, but the problem is the banks are quite steep. So as soon as it starts raining, the water's going to flush through and it's just going to make it uncomfortable. But at least by sitting up here, I've got a good vantage point, and if I see anything, I can act on it. But if not, I'll be redoing the rods within the next couple of 3 hours. More bait. I reckon there's a chance we're going to get another one today. Baiting up on the 2 and 3 varies slightly to baiting up on the 1. Now over on the 1, you can afford to get away with a bit more of a traditional spod mix, so to speak, your chop boilies and your particles, because you are looking to attract the bream and the carp into your peg to create a bit of a competitive feeding situation. But over on the 2 and 3, now whilst it does have a rather impressive head of big bream, I want to do everything that I possibly can to avoid them. And not only that as well, the carp are a lot more spooky. So the last thing I want to be doing is attracting loads of bream into the peg, continually casting, because the carp are just going to end up at the other end of the lake. On the 2 and 3, I've gone for a mix of whole and chop boilies for a couple of reasons really. The 2 and 3 is extremely shallow and it's very, very silty. I'm going to be putting this bait out via a spom, and the last thing I want to be doing is feeding pure whole boilies that will be sinking down into the soft silt, and they're just not going to be there presentable for the carp. By putting a majority chops into the mix, they're going to flutter down nice and slowly. They're going to nestle on the soft silt, so as soon as the carp come over the spot, they're going to be visual and they're going to be ready for the carp to eat. Not only that, if I was to add particles and naturals into this mix, there's a lot of eels in the lake as well. I would attract those into the swim, and like I've already said, I would attract the bream into the swim as well. So that's a brief look at the bait that I'm using. It is always worth adapting it to the lake that you're fishing to suit the situation. True to stow form, they're not in the same place longer than a couple of hours. There's a few fish up the very top end in the shallows. There was someone in there yesterday, but it is free now. The rain is due in any minute, but there is quite a lot of fish up there. And looking at yesterday, moving on to fish when we saw them, flicking some singles to them, managed to get a bite. There's nothing in front of me at the minute. I'm going to move around there, so I'm going to quickly chuck all the gear on the barra, run some rods around there, fling them out. Never know, effort equals reward. Well, it's quite apparent there's more fish down here than what I first thought. One of the main reasons is they flush the water through here every now and again, and it's currently running through, whereas yesterday it wasn't running through, which is probably half the reason why there is quite a few fish down here. This is quite a good vantage point to fish from here, and it gives me a better angle of being able to get them back because they're more over onto the far side, whereas if I go round in the peg to the right, there's every risk that they could run and kite round an island, whereas here I'm sort of fishing direct to them, so if I do get a bite, I can pull them away from the island rather than risk them running around the island. So I'm just gonna have a little look, again, try and work out an area where there's quite a few fish moving or there's more disturbance. I'm gonna get a couple of leads on the rods. I'm not gonna change the hook baits or nothing. They've only been out there a few hours, and I'm just gonna ping them out to where these fish are. You never know, something might happen. There's a few out there. Yeah, let's just get them straight out. So nothing happened down the other end. It was very, very shallow. There was a few fish about, but I think by the time I'd made a couple of casts to them, it was that shallow that I couldn't feel for a drop. So my head sort of was a bit like, oh, yeah, am I fishing? Aren't I fishing? And I had leg clips on and I didn't have the stuff to hand to be able to quickly change over to heli. So I've come back round now into the peg where I fished yesterday evening. I've got the rods out. I've put 2 rods back out on the spot, and I have put another 10 spoms of bait over the top. And I've just left the third one for the minute, just while I have myself a little bowl of noodles, because there is a few fish started to show. And much like yesterday evening, I want to see where a majority of them are showing before I put a fresh hook bait on and fling it out onto that. But I am going to stay put here for the evening, regardless of what I see anywhere else, just on the fact that yesterday evening, from about 7 till 9:30, I had 3 opportunities. And if I can repeat that tonight, well, it's going to be better than I ever expected. So yeah, let's see what the rest of the day brings. Well, I've been watching the fish go mad for the past hour or so, and I've just had a savage drop back on the bait, and I'm in to another 2 and 3 carp. Every fish out of here is such a buzz. It's kited round to the left, and as it sort of powered through the water, it spooked quite a few fish. It's flattened off now, and it's completely flat calm. It's like a sheet of glass, and there's so much activity. There's so many fish fizzing and all sorts going on, but these are old fish. They're pressured fish, and they're so wary. And it's a case of sitting on your hands and not wanting to recast every 10 seconds to show him fish, because believe me, you could be casting a million times and I don't think it would work at all. So it's a case of sitting on your hands, waiting for it to happen, and here we are into a fish. And what's even better about it is it's off the baited spot, and yeah, that fills me with confidence, that does. So I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to concentrate on getting this one in, because they fight really weird because it's shallow water. Concentrate on getting this one in, and hopefully I'll show you another 2 and 3 carp. Going a little bit quicker than I thought. Go on, there you go. Yes! Another one. Yes! Another common, another old one. That's what it's all about. Well, how about that then? Another proper old Stow 2 and 3 common. This time it came over the baited area, which I am really, really pleased about, because it just goes to show that putting that extra effort in yesterday, putting the bait out before we left, and getting back on the gate early this morning, getting back in the swim, even though I've had a little move today and I've gone down the other end, I've come back to this swim because I had faith in what I was doing. Look at that, what a beast. That'll do for me. And this time yesterday, I hadn't actually even cast a rod out in the 2 and 3, and I've already had a bite. So who knows what the rest of the evening could bring. And I'll tell you what makes it even more special, I caught it on my birthday. Happy birthday to me. Well, it's turned into a rather miserable afternoon, well, evening. It's getting on now. I've only got about an hour until the gate closes, and as you can see, I am bent in to another carp. And yeah, hopefully if I can get this one in, it's going to brighten up a rather dull day. They did say this was forecast, and the problem is with no wind, it isn't going anywhere, and it's sat right overhead, and yeah, it's very wet, but it's all good. The only annoying thing is, coming back tomorrow, I've got no means of drying the kit out. So I'm going to end the day soaking wet, and I'm going to start tomorrow soaking wet, and I'm going to have a van full of soaking wet, smelly gear tonight. but I'm not complaining. Another old Stow common. Come on, in we go. Let's end her down a high. There we go. Oh, well, it might be raining, but we got ourselves another carp. Yes, that'll do. There we go, another proper character from the 2 and 3. Got about 45 minutes of the day left. I did clip the rod back up and put it back out before getting this fish out because there is always that last chance. But another brilliant day, despite the absolute soaking wet end to it. I'm going to be packing away a load of wet gear, but on the plus side, I am back tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is once I've reeled the rods in, I'm going to put another 12 or 15 spoms out to the spot, head back here in the morning as a starting point, but you never know, tomorrow's a new day. Anyway, I'm going to get this little one back, sit out the last 45 minutes, and you never know, there might be a chance of another bite. So it's my final day at Walthamstow today, and to be honest with you, I am starting to feel it a little bit. Fishing days only is hard work. We're having to leave site when the gates close at 10, travel back to Brad, which is about an hour away, and then come back in the morning. And to ensure that I'm getting back in the same pegs, or to put me in with the best chance, I'm leaving mega early, so I'm first on the gate, and it is starting to take its toll. But on the flip side of that, it has been an amazing 2 days so far. And I'm hoping that today, the final day, that there's one more chance to be had out there. I am going to go back into the same peg that I was in yesterday and also Monday evening, purely and simply because yesterday I caught over the bait that I'd put out on the Monday. I put more bait out when I left yesterday, and you never know, there might still be another chance out there. So I've just got round to the top car park. I've chucked the gear on the barra. It's still absolutely soaking wet from yesterday, but the sun's out today, so I'm going to be able to dry that out before I go home. I'm going to go around there, set up a bit of a camp, get the rods back out, chill out today. I'm not going to move, I'm going to stay there. The weather hasn't really changed a great deal. The wind's still in the same direction, but I know that the fish were there about 8 or 10 hours ago, so they're not going to have gone far. Get the rods out, like I say, have a chill, see what happens. Let's do this, final day. But that's it then, the rods are back out for the final day here at the Stow. And I say rods, I've only got 2 out at the minute, and I've put them both out on the baited area. And interestingly, when I chucked onto the spot yesterday morning, the bottom felt a little bit firmer than the night before. Well, when I've chucked them out this morning, it was a lot firmer. So not only did I catch 3 fish off the area yesterday, I think the bait that I put in before I left has definitely been polished off. And what I've chose to do today, which I didn't do yesterday, is I didn't put more bait out once I'd put the 2 rods out. I sort of put them out thinking that if the fish are still in the area, I don't want to spook them with more spoms. There's going to be a little bit of bait left there. I might potentially nick a bite. Well, that didn't happen. So this morning, 2 rods back out, nice firm drops on both of them. And for those of you that have fished the 2 and 3, you will know it is extremely silty. So they must have proper rooted that spot out. Now, as well, I know I've come back into the same swim. It is days only on here. The fish are active, and whilst I'm not really actively looking around the number 2 reservoir, which is down to my left, there could potentially be fish down there, I know that, but with limited time and only being able to fish here on the days, you know, we haven't been granted any special permission to stay and fish overnight. We're leaving with everyone else and we're turning up with everybody else. I don't want to run the risk of moving and running around and going down onto the 2 when I know that I've got a spot out here that's established. And aside from that as well, I have caught from it, and there are still quite a few of the original fish in here that we used to catch years ago. Some of them we never had the chance of catching, and in particular the big common does like to come out over a little bit of bait. So whilst it's a tall order and it probably won't happen, we're fishing a lake where it could potentially happen. So rather than running around and chasing them, yes, I have come back into the same peg, but it is worth noting as well, if you are fishing days only, if you've got an area going, put the extra effort in to be able to get back into the same peg the following day, because even though the best time is at night, obviously because it's days only, no one's fishing here through the nights unless you come on the weekend at the end of every month where you are allowed to do the one night. That's obviously the best time, but if you can't fish here that time, you've got to make the most of every opportunity, and by constantly baiting an area, building the fish's confidence, you never know, there might be a chance through the day today, but I am confident that come this evening, seeing as the last 2 evenings I've had 3 bites both evenings, that there is a chance of another bite. And like I keep saying, you never know. There is a 40-pound common in here that was 40 pound when I started fishing here 20 years ago, and to think that that fish is still out there now just blows my mind. So yeah, 2 rods are out on the bait. With the third, if I see something, I'm just going to act on it, but they're out there, they're bang on, they both went down for a good drop, a few more spoms over the top. Sit back, chill out, see what happens. One thing the Stow has taught me over all these years is to keep things simple. Now obviously, as time goes on, modern tackle develops, modern tackle changes, and the way in which we tie rigs and apply them to the water also changes. You know, fishing to a clip, being a lot more subtle in your approach. But one thing that I've always stuck to in my fishing is keeping it very, very simple. Now, majority of my fishing, when I'm fishing with a bottom bait or a wafter, is an Illusion D-rig. Now back 20 years ago, I remember sitting on these very platforms with lengths of mono that we used to cut off the end of our reel line, knotless knotting it to a size 8 B175 with a hair, putting a boilie on and casting it out. And to be honest, other than the fact that with the Illusion D-rig you can change the hook bait that little bit quicker, there isn't really much of a difference in the way the two presentations are. And like I say, we're 20 years apart now. The only thing that has really changed, I suppose, is the way in which I fish with pop-ups. Now, back then, the 360 rig wasn't thought of, the Ronnie rig certainly wasn't thought of, and if we wanted to fish a pop-up, all we used to do was either bite a split shot on our mono hook link and use it as a pop-up, which looking back now, the presentation must have been absolutely dreadful, or we would tie one out of Super Mantis, which again, looking back, was one of the hardest materials to work with. You'd strip it back, it'd be coily, but back then we didn't have the technology and the means of fishing how we do now. But like I say, one thing that has always remained in my fishing and something that was cemented into me when I fished on the Stow is it wasn't about what tackle you had, what accessories you had, it was all about where you put them rigs. And you could have the worst rig in the world, but if it was in the right place, you was going to get a bite. Well, that's it then, the end of my return trip to Walthamstow reservoirs. Today hasn't planned out like I thought it was going to. Haven't even had a bite today. The fish have been over me again. A slight change in the weather has meant no bites, but what an amazing return trip it's been. Not only did I catch out of the number 1, a venue where I very first picked up a spod rod, but I also come on to the 2 and the 3, which by no means is an easy venue. Found where the fish were, applied near enough the same tactics that we were using up here some 20 years ago when I used to come up here with my old man, and managed to catch some fish. And not only that as well, a couple of original fish, which clearly were swimming around in here when I fished here all those years ago. It has simply been an amazing couple of days. I've got to get these rods in now and make a mad dash for the van because the gate's shut in about 15 minutes time. But I hope that you've enjoyed watching this just as much as I've enjoyed making it. And if you haven't been to Walthamstow, it is definitely somewhere that I would highly, highly recommend, not just because of the fish that are in here, but the environment in which they live in. It's been an amazing trip, better than I ever could have expected, and I will definitely be coming back to Walthamstow for some future videos.